Now, if you've ever wondered why you can be in remission one day and a full-blown flare the next, and this is going to be for you. Now, most doctors believe that this is entirely random. They believe that IBD is completely unpredictable and that it's sort of, we'll say frankly, unfounded, this belief that IBD is innate to your biology. Like it's something that no matter what you do, you can't change. It's just part of who you are, or that having inflammatory bowel disease is just a genetic thing that you were sort of born with, which it's just not. And so in this training, we're going to talk about, number one, why you can go from flare into remission and sort of flip-flop. We'll talk, number two, about some of the factors that can contribute to this flipping, flopping back and forth. And of course, we're going to talk about what you can do to improve your chances of staying in remission and ultimately begin the reversal process. Now, for those of you who are new here, my name is Josh Deck. I'm a holistic nutritionist and ex-paramedic. I'm now an IBD specialist and a medical lecturer, as well as a physician's consultant for inflammatory bowel disease, so that's Crohn's and colitis, as well as other complex digestive issues like irritable bowel syndrome. And so we've helped hundreds of people reverse their IBD in the last few years alone and find natural relief coming off of medication. And so I'm on a mission to help the world see that IBD is reversible, because frankly, if we leave it up to the guys making $800 billion a year off gut disease alone, you'll be on a subscription for life. And so our job is to help you come off these drugs. So if you're here and you're ready to get started, you want to talk about why you can flip-flop between flare and remission, you want to talk about the factors that can contribute to this disease process and this inflammation happening on and off, as well as what you can do about it, then you're in the right place. And so let's dive in and talk about this. First things first, I want to define IBD as it relates to inflammation. So I want to define inflammatory bowel disease or Crohn's and colitis as it relates to inflammation. And so if you're listening to the podcast version of this, you might have some trouble understanding this. So I'm going to do my best to describe with words as well. So picture this. We have a scale. On the left side, we have no inflammation. On the right side, we have huge levels of inflammation. If you've heard me talk about this before, this little section here might sound redundant, but I promise you, stay tuned, okay? So over here, we have no inflammation. This is the ideal gut. This is a healthy gut. A healthy gut should never go past this. If this is a 0 out of 10, middle is 5 out of 10, the far end of the spectrum is a 10 out of 10, okay? What we want to see, ideally, everyone is a 0. You should not have inflammation in your gut. Even low-grade things, a little bit of bloat, some gas, constipation, maybe you had a little gut upset long before you had inflammatory bowel disease. We've seen people as young as 2 years old, some as young as 70 and 80 years old dealing with this, some for a couple of months, some for decades. Everyone's different, but the idea is a healthy gut should never have any level of inflammation. It should be a hard 0. Here's what happens though. When we look to our doctors, again, they assume you are born as a 5. You kind of just had this thing. You were here as a 5 out of 10 inflammation. It was inevitably going to happen. It was just a matter of time. There's nothing we can do. So the ideology is this is an innate part of your biology. There's nothing we can do. And so all we can do is control it from going from a 10 out of 10 to a 5 out of 10. So the goal in Western medicine is simply to control it. So basically we're going from a bonfire to just having a little bit of smoldering embers. That's sort of the idea that they want to have here. But of course, this doesn't make any sense. How can your body just inherently become inflamed? You can't wake up one day and suddenly be allergic to yourself. It doesn't work that way. That flies in the face of everything we know about science. In fact, it's taking leaps and bounds away from what we do know about science, making a hell of a lot of unfounded assumptions. And so our job is to understand you can't just wake up one day and randomly become allergic to yourself. And so what the doctors are trying to do is say, okay, you're going to be inflamed no matter what. There's going to be this low-grade inflammation somewhere. Our job is to just keep it from being a 10 out of 10. We'll reduce it to a 5 out of 10, and that's remission. We're happy. Now, if you can get that a little bit lower, even better, lucky you, but the goal is just to reduce the symptoms or control the symptoms, not eliminate them altogether. Okay? Many people have eliminated their symptoms, but it inevitably comes back. We'll talk about why that's happening. That's part of the flip-flop. But here's the thing. We want 0. We want 0 inflammation. Now, in my practice, there are very few cases we've seen that are truly, unquestionably, undoubtedly autoimmune. Of hundreds of cases we've helped reverse, very few are actually autoimmune. Many people dealing with these situations are in fact on the inflammatory spectrum before they become autoimmune. Now, if you guys recall, I have a autoimmune or an inflammatory bowel disease ladder that I've sort of created. And so the first layer of this ladder will go left to right. Now, This is the first rung on the left side, on the bottom hand side, okay? This one is zero inflammation. On the right side of this rung, we're now going to develop some IBS symptoms. Now, if your IBS kicks up, now again, some people skip these rungs. Some people go really far, really fast. Some people jump around. Everyone's different, but this is the general idea. We'll call it textbook progression. So you have some irritable bowel syndrome, okay? Something is starting to progress and get a little bit worse. Well, now you jump to the second rung of the ladder, back on the left-hand side. We're left to right, going up and down, kind of like Donkey Kong and his barrels, okay? So you have no inflammation. Now you progress in the first rung to IBS. Well, from the second rung, this is where you go from having IBS, things progressively get worse until you develop IBD. Okay, so on the second rung, on the end, we now developed inflammatory bowel disease. Well, I look at Crohn's and colitis as being different, because they obviously are. So I put colitis on the left of the third rung, and I put Crohn's on the right of the third rung. So colitis is the lesser version of Crohn's. Crohn's is mouth to anus, your entire GI tract. It's very deep in the tissues. Colitis is surface level, isolated to the colon. Therefore, by this definition of what's affected and how bad, Crohn's is worse than colitis. But here's what happens. If you have these diseases, some people have colitis that jump, some people have Crohn's that jump, some people skip colitis and go to Crohn's. That's okay. Just pay attention to what I'm doing here. This is the autoimmune spectrum. So now, once you've gone from no inflammation to IBS, you jump from the second rung from IBS to IBD, you now climb up from colitis to Crohn's or skip. Now, if it's severe enough, for long enough and progressed enough, there's enough wrong or there's enough damage to the areas, now we can jump to the autoimmune ladder. And some people are low-grade autoimmune, some people are severe autoimmune with multiple autoimmune conditions. But this is the ladder. Here's the problem with this. Most doctors assume everybody is on the top of the fourth rung, full-blown autoimmune, and it's only going to get worse from there. They jump 4 rungs or 8 points. They go from 0 to IBS, skip that. IBS to IBD, skip. Colitis to Crohn's, skip. You're automatically on the autoimmune ladder. Doesn't make any sense. And so this is why the entire ideology behind Western medicine's approach to inflammatory bowel disease is completely nonsensical, because you can't just randomly become inflamed one day. On the other hand, if you are autoimmune and on the autoimmune spectrum, the leading prognosis right now that actually makes any sense versus your body randomly being allergic to your own tissues, which just doesn't happen, there are cells in charge of you being allergic to your own tissues. They kill them, right? These natural killer cells go after a lot of this stuff. And so we have to understand that if your body is flaring, it's inflamed for an external reason. If it is autoimmune, the running hypothesis now that I talked to Dr. Will Bolsowitz about just a couple weeks back at the time of this recording is that your body might be attacking your own microbiome. Well, the top things we see in inflammatory bowel disease, at least in my practice, is going to be, of course, dietary. We have dysbiosis, E. coli, but we have mold, we have fungus, we have Clostridia, we have parasites, we have heavy metals and toxic overload and drainage issues and all kinds. But what happens when we have those? Well, it piles up inflammation. Your body, that's all part of your microbiome or what your microbiome's doing. Well, of course your body's going to attack it if it's causing problems. So even if you're autoimmune, which most in my practice are not, it's not your own tissues, it's your microbiome. So correct the microbiome, the logic stands, you can then fix yourself. Now, it's not as easy as taking probiotics, but you get the idea, okay? So this is the definition now. I want to go back to this. What is inflammation? What is remission? What is a flare? A flare is a full-blown 10 out of 10. I'm highly inflamed, I'm having problems. If we go back, remission, 5 out of 10. Could be worse, not as bad as we've seen it. Thank God for that. But I'm looking for a 0. A healthy gut should not be inflamed. We want you to do what many of our clients before have done, which is remove the thing your body is inflaming to, so you're no longer inflamed and your body can heal itself. That's the idea. So let's talk about this then. If remission is low grade of the spectrum, and the goal is not simply controlling inflammation, but removing the reason why your body's inflamed so it no longer is inflamed, then we have to keep in mind, let's talk about what gives your body the reason to be inflamed, or what things give it a reason to be inflamed is probably a better way of saying that. My sentences sometimes don't make a ton of sense. I'm talking out loud. Thank you guys. So let's talk about this really quick. Picture a glass. Now, for those of you listening on the podcast version, you won't see what I'm drawing, but I'm drawing a glass on the board here, okay? I'm trying to draw a glass, my markers dry out too quickly. Okay, so we have this glass on the board. Now I want you to picture, when you were a kid, you used to draw these cartoon waves, right? You come up and down, and they kind of look like razor blades, okay? But you can see there's high points and low points in the glass. If you take this zigzag pattern up and down of the waves, right, you can see that there are high points and low points. Well, I want you to picture this. As your body is always going through high points and low points. If you're stressed, that's a high point. If you're feeling good and relaxed, that's a low point. If you eat some junk food, that's a high point. There's extra water in the glass. If you're eating healthy, it's a low point. If you are overexerting yourself, you're way overstressed at work, you're overtraining in the gym, you're running around like a madman, that's a high point. There's too much stress in the system. There's higher levels of water in the glass, but it's constantly passing. It's constantly moving. Your body is always in flux. Okay, so some days we are feeling really good. Some days we have very little water in the glass. Maybe you spend an entire day down here with this low level of water in your glass. Maybe some days you have a higher level of water in your glass. But here's the idea. As this wave, this high and low, is passing through the cup of water, kind of pushing through its side, what we have to look at here is that some days we go days with them, some days you'll be good in the morning and bad at night. And depending on the level of water, how full your glass gets, this is where the flares come into play. Now, most of us are used to this up and down. That's what daily life is. We get a little stressed. We go to the gym. Maybe we eat something we shouldn't. Maybe we have a good night's sleep or a bad night's sleep. These all change the levels of water in your glass. And so look at it this way. If your glass is full all the time, like most of you are, right? In order to have this glass not full, we have to have a proper drainage site at the bottom. We have to be able to drain our glass. But most of us dealing with IBD, if you have Crohn's or colitis or bowel disease of some kind, your glass is basically full. Well, now what happens if we take this glass only an inch from the top, we now add these waves of water. Now look what happens. There are now peaks of this water running through where the height of the wave is over top of your glass. You are over full, which means you overflow. When you overflow, things spill, and this is where symptoms happen. Now, in the best cases, you have the ability to drain this glass. It actually empties out. And so when these waves come through the highs and the lows, you're no more than a half or a third or a quarter full, like a healthy person. Your body doesn't go into a flare. You don't overflow and where the symptoms come in. And so a flare is simply things overfilling your glass, things overflowing your system. And if your system is already full, the slightest bit of water tips over the edge, you overflow and you're now in a flare. And this is really what flaring is. So the question is, how do we empty our glass? How do we empty this out in a way that your body can handle the waves of water coming in and out so it doesn't overflow? This is where we have to empty our glass. So we have to look at the things that fill your glass. Now again, we talked about the glass being full, and I'm going to get into that too, but I want to stop for a minute and talk about this drainage, okay? The glass is full. It's not going to drain on its own. It's not been draining for the years or decades or whatever length of time you've had this bowel disease. So we have to look at drainage. Now your drainage, you have different pathways. Any pathway, anything anywhere, or let me correct this, any way that things can get out of your body is a drainage pathway. That can be your sinuses. It can be your lungs. We actually exhale gases. Maybe it's going to be your lymphatic system. We see that a fair bit. It can be your kidneys. We have our skin. I'm going to put liver/bile, like bile ducts. They all kind of work together here. These are great ways. Your gut, of course, your entire GI is a drainage pathway. So we have these major drainage pathways: gut, sinus, lungs, lymph, kidneys, skin, liver, and bile ducts. That makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different drainage pathways. Well, the more inflamed you are, the more things you have going on, they're filling your cup and it's narrowing or closing your drainage pathway. So you're not actually getting rid of the things inside of your body that are causing you the problems. So I'm gonna have a little bit of stress. That adds water into my glass. I'm gonna have some sugar today. That's water in my glass. Today I got yelled at by my boss at work and I wanna go home and I'm having a panic attack. That is a shit ton of water in my glass. Well, if I am not draining any of this properly, of course I'm going to overflow. And everybody we see, the number one step that we have to take with people, and I'm going to correct myself, you guys have watched my stuff from many years ago, as we're learning more, the science is developing around IBD, there's better research, we've now worked with hundreds of people and reversed them, we are prioritizing drainage. Prioritizing getting your gut moving, getting your sinuses and your lungs clear, getting your lymphatic system moving, getting your kidneys open, getting your skin, getting sweat moving, and opening. Number one thing though is liver and bile ducts. Bile recirculates toxins over and over and over again. And your liver gets congested because of all the junk being produced, all the things filling your cup produce byproducts. These byproducts filter through your filtration systems. If you have too many byproducts pushing through your detox pathways and your filtration systems, they get clogged up because the drainage, the pathway isn't thick enough or wide enough to drain as much as you're pushing through. So if we want to get this better, we have to open drainage. And this is where we then go into the 5 R's. But this is the most important thing for reversing IBD, opening drainage first. People miss this all the time. They go right to the pharmaceuticals. They go right to the anti-inflammatory herbs. They want to try the Qing Dais and the curcumin and all the supplements. Great, but you're merely masking the symptoms. If we don't give your body the steps in the room it needs to heal itself, you're just going to be on plant-based medication for the rest of your life. If we actually want to reverse this, we have to take proper steps. So what kind of things can fill your cup? Well, let's talk about that. Sugar, for example, is a great one. We talked about stress. What does sugar do? Well, so many of us eat sugar. Is addictive. Can't say it's not. There are new, quote, studies saying that it's not, but 100% of scientists agree with whoever pays them the most. And so sugar is extremely addictive. And in rat studies, if you give them cocaine and give them sugar, they go for the sugar every time. They like it better. It's more addictive for the rats, okay? But what does sugar do? Like stress, it dysregulates the immune system, number one. In fact, when your blood sugar comes up, we actually have to ramp up a lot of our immune cells in order to increase that glucose metabolism, or your body's ability to break down that sugar. It ramps up your immune system to do that. Well, if your cup is already full, this is your immune system trying to work. Your cup is full from sugar, from stress, from this, from that, from inflammation in your gut, from toxins in your body. It's full. What happens when you add sugar? Well, we use more immune system, the glass overflows. Now we have symptoms. Sugar is also another one. It can increase chronic inflammation, of course, by bad diet. Now that's going to be from insulin, from blood sugar. Sugar, for example, feeds bad microbes, or the microbes we don't want, the opportunistic microbes, where they can overgrow. You eat, you poop. So do your microbes in your microbiome, your bacteria and your parasites, and all these guys eat and poop. They're living organisms. The good guys poop out good stuff. The bad guys poop out bad stuff. Endotoxins. What do endotoxins do? They fill your cup. They add more into the cup. And again, it contributes to overflowing. Now we go, well, I eat sugar once every 10 years. Cool. Well, maybe that one time's enough to overflow you if your cup's already full. Maybe that gluten. Did you know if you have an autoimmune disease like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, for example, gluten, for example, mimics on a molecular level, gluten looks like some of these proteins. And so what it can actually do is ramp up inflammation and increase your immune response for up to 90 days. That's 3 months. Which means if you just eat gluten on special occasions, a birthday, a graduation, on Christmas, celebration, anniversary, you're inflamed all year, contributing to this problem. I cut everybody off of gluten right away, unquestionably. People fight me like, I don't have a gluten sensitivity. You probably have a gluten addiction. There are gluteomorphins, which sit in the morphine receptors in your body. There's an addictive property to gluten. Trust me, I know, been there. And so these things are all filling your glass. Okay, barrier function gets compromised. When we have things we shouldn't do, we eat things we shouldn't eat, when we're stressed more than we should be. Your gut lining, we talked about this leaky gut before. Your gut is stitched together. Picture 2 squares, a little staple holding them together. These are your cells. These little things are called gap junctions. They seal your cells together. What happens when you become inflamed? Well, those gaps open up, those seals let go. This is what creates leaky gut. Those cells spread apart and they become wider and wider. The bigger they get, the more things can pass through. Well, it's only one cell from your small intestine to your blood and lymphatic system. Things start moving where they shouldn't be. Now you have things going all around the body. Well, what does that do? Your body goes, wait a minute, giant piece of chicken. You're not broken down to an amino acid. You shouldn't be in my bloodstream. Let's bring in the cavalry. Let's bring in the immune system to handle this thing and get rid of it. Well, suddenly you have a food sensitivity to chicken now because of the leaks in the gut. And what that does, it draws more from your immune system, filling more of your cup. There are so many things that fill our cup. Environmental triggers, smoking, alcohol. Maybe you're somebody who's completely off all those things. You're doing everything you can to heal. There's probably still a foreign body or a pathogen or something inside of your body that's not allowing it to turn over and do what it needs to do, thereby filling your cup more. It's always something. Your body can't randomly become allergic to itself. Now, there are some predisposing factors. Some people genetically have an even narrower drainage pathway out the bottom of their cup than some people, which makes it harder to empty their glass. Some people genetically might be more prone to having some immune dysregulation in their gut. So if your gut goes off a little, for you, you experience it a lot. It's like somebody with a low pain tolerance. You prick me with a pin, I'm covered in tattoos. You prick me with a pin, I'm annoyed, I'm not gonna cry about it. You prick a kid, they're going to be pretty pissed off. They're probably going to cry about it. And so the same thing happens. It's a level of pain tolerance, for example. And so I can handle maybe a lot more pain than like a 3-year-old. Well, if you have the drainage pathways that are a lot smaller than somebody else, you're not going to have the same level of tolerance as I would say a pain threshold. And so we have to look at this and understand that your body has different drainage mechanisms, different genetic contributing factors that make it more prone or make you more prone to having these issues. Maybe you have genetic factors that influence how your body turns over cells inside of your GI tract, leaving more old cells which are prone to damage and inflammation. You're not turning them over properly. Well, you're more prone to expressing inflammation in your gut. Maybe you have a genetic SNP, which we say SNP, that's SNP, stands for single nucleotide polymorphism, is the sciencey fancy word. It's just the genetic modifications of the changes in the links. But what happens, maybe you have one where your body doesn't regulate bacteria quite the same as somebody else. Well, of course, if you have elevated levels of bad bacteria not being well regulated, you're going to get Crohn's or colitis in the area because your body's expressing inflammation or prone to inflammation in that way. That's what genetics mean. It doesn't mean you're guaranteed. It just means you need support for the things your body's not doing properly. We can remove the reason why your body's inflamed and it can begin healing itself. So let's talk about what we need to do to prevent flares. Let's talk about this. Well, obviously, we spent so much time talking about your cup being full. Well, we have to empty your cup. So the first thing to preventing a flare is emptying the cup, going into drainage. That's your liver, bile ducts, your gallbladder. We talked about gut, sinuses, lungs, kidneys, all that stuff. We have to open your drainage. Maybe that looks like, I'm not telling you guys to do this because you're not working with me. It can be dangerous if you're not under supervision, but we utilize things like coffee enemas. We utilize things like gallbladder flushes. We might utilize certain supplements to help the bile flow move. Keep in mind, 95% of your bile gets recycled. We call it enterohepatic recirculation. Now what happens in your intestines, you have your small intestine in here. I'm trying to draw liver and bile. Anyway, so what happens, your liver creates the bile, it goes into the bile duct, the bile secretes it into the small intestine. Now what happens is your body takes that, reuptakes that, recycles it into the liver, back to the bile ducts, back to the small intestine. This is called entero, that's your liver, entero, your gut, hepatic, your liver, recirculation. It recirculates this bile. It's very expensive to make. Well, your bile is also really important for cleaning and detoxifying. It helps move things through the body, it helps detoxify, it helps emulsify fats, it does all kinds of cool stuff. Well, and there are also enzymes in your gut produced from bad bacteria. All these things are recirculating and recycling toxins if they're not moving properly. So we can actually clean these things out and clean these drainage systems. It's like breathing air in your home with a dirty air filter. Of course you're gonna be sick and have respiratory issues. If you're constantly recirculating junk from your bile around the body, of course you're gonna have other toxicity issues because your filters are broken. So we have to promote drainage. We have to empty the cup. Now I'm gonna sound like a broken record because I talk about this all the time. I just talked about it on a last live, but we have to go through the 5 R's. Now everyone's got sort of a different 5 R's. I'll preface with that. Here's my voice cracking like I'm hitting puberty. Everyone's sort of got a different variant of the 5 R's, but the concept still stands. The first thing we have to do, like drainage, we have to remove the problem. Part of that is drainage. Part of that is going to be physically removing things, be it parasites or microbes or fungus or mold or something else, right? We have to physically remove the problem. Of course, we have to replenish what your body has lost, be it nutrients or microbes or something else, because your body can't work in a deficit. Just like you can't have construction workers building something without tools, your cells, your body can't work without the nutrients or the tools that it needs. Number 3, we're going to have to rebuild. Now we have to rebuild that gut microbiome, and repair is your 4th R, the gut, or the tissues in the GI. You couldn't live in a house that's on fire, neither do you gut bacteria. We have to rebuild that microbiome as a whole, not just taking probiotics. There are trillions, upwards of 100 trillion different bacteria and microbes living inside of your gut. They outnumber you 10 to 1. Taking a handful of probiotics isn't going to do much. I talked about that in the last one. I won't harp on it now. But the idea is that probiotics are not the same for everybody. Probiotics are not all made the same. Everyone's going to be different. And so if you've ever taken probiotics, just comment probiotic. Let me know. I'm sure you guys have tried them. I just want to know how many of you are doing this. So we have to begin rebuilding that microbiome properly. There's a lot of ways to do that. We have to, of course, repair the tissues. And then my personal favorite, this is really, really important, is rejuvenate the immune system, not boost. If you're imbalanced and you boost an imbalance, you boost the imbalance. You make things worse. You further push this imbalance. It's like having a scale. Instead of putting weight on both sides, you keep adding to one side. Of course, it's not going to rebalance itself. So we always have to work on rejuvenating, which is bringing balance back to your body. Now, here's the thing. I know this can seem overwhelming. Some people it's not. We have what we call, I talk about it sometimes from time to time, called the Dunning-Kruger effect. That's where sometimes it can seem so bloody simple, we might get overconfident. I do want to caution you guys away from that. I spent 10 years figuring this stuff out, building an education around this, working with doctors and working with hundreds of people to figure out the nuances. It's not as simple as taking probiotics or as simple as, sticking coffee up your butt through an enema. But the idea is there's a lot of steps and stages to get you there safely and successfully. IBD is very reversible. It's not something you're stuck with. It's not something you're born with. It's not random. It's not always this autoimmune unknown condition. It's not just genetic and there's no known cause. You can get the help you need. You just got to ask for it.